Horseman, brainbuster, and maybe a little bit controversial? Yeah, things are about to get interesting. If you know wrestling, you've probably heard his name before, whether it's as part of the iconic Four Horsemen or his legendary tag team, the Brainbusters, with Arn Anderson. Tully wasn't just some guy who decided to become a wrestler one day. He was born into it. His dad, Joe Blanchard, was a big-time wrestler back in the day, so you could say wrestling was in his blood. Tully started wrestling in the 70s, and he quickly learned how to be really, really good. He was like a scientist in the ring, planning every move, every hold, every takedown. And boy, could he talk. He knew how to get the crowd riled up and make them love to hate him. But like any good story, there's more than meets the eye. Here, we're going behind the scenes to uncover the controversies, the personal struggles, and the complicated life of Tully Blanchard. So let's go back to 1989. Tully and Arn were tearing it up in WWE as the Brainbusters. These two were unstoppable, and their technical skills made them one of the most respected tag teams around. But their WWE run was coming to an end, and they had big plans to head back to WCW. That's where they'd first made their names as part of the legendary Four Horsemen, so a return there seemed like a no-brainer. Fans were excited, and it looked like a smooth transition for the pair. But just when things seemed to be falling into place, everything came crashing down. Right before their return to WCW, Tully failed a drug test for cocaine. WWE had a strict policy at the time, and failing a drug test wasn't something they brushed off. Tully was immediately fired, and that was just the beginning. WCW got wind of the failed test and decided they didn't want to take the risk of hiring him. Just like that, Tully went from being part of one of the best tag teams in wrestling to being out of a job. It wasn't just about losing the paycheck or the opportunity. This moment really derailed Tully's career. He ended up wrestling in the AWA for a while, but let's be honest, it wasn't the same. The buzz, the momentum, the spotlight he'd worked so hard for, it all faded. And to make things worse, this whole situation put a strain on his friendship and partnership with Arn Anderson. While Arn was able to return to WCW and rebuild his career, Tully was left to pick up the pieces on his own. If that wasn't enough, things got even messier for Tully years later. In 2020, some pretty serious accusations came out against him. Several female wrestlers, including Allison Kay, accused Tully of racist behavior. There were claims that during a wrestling tour in Japan, he spat in the face of a black female wrestler and used a racial slur. Yeah, heavy stuff. And it got even more complicated when Tessa Blanchard, Tully's own daughter, publicly supported the accusations. Now, Tully denied everything. He said the claims were false and insisted that nothing like that ever happened. But here's the thing. Even without hard evidence, accusations like that stick. It's one of those situations where the damage is done, whether or not the claims are true. Fans and people in the wrestling world started to distance themselves from Tully. His reputation took another hit, and let's face it, those kinds of allegations are tough to bounce back from. On top of all that, Tully has always had a bit of a reputation for being difficult to work with. He's known for being outspoken and having strong opinions, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely ruffled some feathers over the years. One of the biggest examples of this came in 1995 during WCW's Slamboree event. Tully was booked to lose a hardcore match against Terry Funk, but he refused. He thought losing to Funk would hurt his credibility, so he said no. Now in wrestling, refusing to do the job is a big deal. It's like breaking an unspoken rule. You're supposed to put the match first, not your ego. So when Tully refused, it didn't go over well. It strained his relationship with WCW even more, and it didn't do him any favors when it came to future bookings. It's one of those moments where his strong personality worked against him. And then there's Tully's personal life, which has had its own share of challenges. He's been married 4 times, which, let's be real, isn't easy on anyone. We don't know the details of why those marriages ended. It's not really our place to speculate. But going through that kind of emotional stress over and over again has to be tough. Relationships are hard enough as it is, and adding the pressures of life on the road in wrestling probably didn't help. But one of the most complicated parts of Tully's story is his relationship with his daughter, Tessa Blanchard. Tessa is a big name in wrestling now, carving out her own legacy, but their relationship seems complicated to say the least. They've worked together before, but those racism allegations against Tully created a major rift. Tessa publicly supported the claims, which had to be tough for Tully to hear. On top of that, there have been rumors of disagreements about wrestling decisions and career moves, which only adds to the tension. It's clear that their relationship isn't exactly smooth sailing, and it's hard not to feel for both of them in that situation. Tully Blanchard's story is a wild ride, full of ups and downs. He's a legend in the wrestling world, no doubt about it. His work with the Four Horsemen and the Brainbusters cemented his place in history, but his career and life are also a reminder of how quickly things can change. Whether it's one bad decision or a reputation that catches up with you, the road to greatness is never easy. So what do you think about Tully's journey? He's a fascinating figure, and his story raises a lot of questions about fame, reputation, and the choices we make along the way. Now here's something interesting for the real fans. If you, like me, love Tully regardless of his bumpy reputation, here is a quick rundown of his epic career, starting with his early life, his rise, fall, and where he is now. Let's start. Tully Blanchard is one of those names that stands out in the history of professional wrestling. Born on January 22, 1954, he grew up surrounded by the sport, thanks to his dad, Joe Blanchard, who was a wrestling promoter and a former star in the American Wrestling Association. For Tully, wrestling wasn't just something he discovered later in life. It was in his blood. As a kid, he was already helping out at events, selling programs and snacks, and later working as a referee. Before he became a full-time wrestler, Tully had a passion for football. He played at West Texas State University, where he was teammates with other future wrestling stars like Tito Santana and Ted DiBiase. It's amazing to think how many legendary careers started on that same football field. But as much as Tully loved football, wrestling was his destiny. Tully made his professional debut in 1975, trained by his dad and Jose Lotario, who helped shape him into the wrestler he would become. He started out in Southwest Championship Wrestling, a promotion run by his father. Tully wasn't just a wrestler there. He was involved behind the scenes, learning the ropes of production and creative work. Right from the start, you could see his talent. He won titles like the SCW Southwest Television Championship and the SCW Southwest Heavyweight Championship several times. During this period, he also teamed up with Gino Hernandez to form the Dynamic Duo, a pair of villains who dominated the tag team scene. Together, they won multiple championships and became a force to be reckoned with. In 1984, Tully took his career to the next level by joining Jim Crockett Promotions. This was where he really started to make a name for himself. Right away, he was in the mix for the NWA Television Championship, winning it in a match against Mark Youngblood. Tully held that title for almost a year, defending it against some of the biggest names in wrestling, including Ricky Steamboat. When Steamboat left the promotion, Tully's focus shifted to Dusty Rhodes, sparking one of the most memorable rivalries in wrestling history. Their battles for the TV title were intense, and one of their most famous matches was inside a steel cage at the Great American Bash. Dusty won the title and even the services of Tully's manager, Baby Doll, for 30 days. Wrestling fans couldn't get enough of the drama. Tully was known for his charisma, technical skills, and ability to tell a story in the ring. One of his most unforgettable rivalries was with Magnum TA. Their feud over the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship had fans on the edge of their seats. It all came to a head at Starrcade '85 in a brutal I Quit match inside a steel cage. This match wasn't just a fight, it was a war. In the end, Magnum forced Tully to quit by driving a jagged piece of a broken chair into his already bloody forehead. It's still considered one of the greatest matches in wrestling history. As the years went on, Tully became part of something even bigger. The Four Horsemen. Formed in 1986 alongside Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and Ole Anderson, this group changed wrestling forever. They were dominant, capturing championships and controlling the NWA scene. Tully himself won the NWA National Heavyweight Championship and was a key player in the group's success. The Four Horsemen were known for their arrogance, flashy lifestyles, and ability to back it all up in the ring. They feuded with top stars like Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, the Road Warriors, and the Rock and Roll Express, and they always made an impact wherever they went. Eventually, Tully and Arn Anderson began focusing on the tag team division. They worked so well together, and their matches were some of the best tag team wrestling fans had ever seen. They won the NWA World Tag Team Championship after an intense rivalry with the Rock and Roll Express. Later, the duo moved to the World Wrestling Federation, where they became known as the Brain Busters, managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan. They kept their winning ways going, even capturing the WWF World Tag Team Championship. In 1990, Tully found himself in the American Wrestling Association, AWA, briefly aligning with the Destruction Crew and even winning a match at Super Clash of 4. However, his time there was short-lived. The wrestling world continued to call, and in 1993, WCW approached Tully with an offer to reform the Four Horsemen. Unfortunately, the offer wasn't up to his expectations, and WCW replaced him with Paul Roma. Tully did make a one-night return to WCW in 1994 at Slamboree, where he faced Terry Funk. The match ended in a double disqualification, and Tully moved on again. The mid-1990s saw him in Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, where he challenged Shane Douglas for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Although Tully didn't capture the title, his matches reminded fans of his talent and grit. Even as Tully's in-ring career slowed down, he wasn't done adding to his legacy. In 1998, he teamed with Barry Windham, another Four Horsemen alumnus, to win the NWA World Tag Team titles. That same year, he appeared at the NWA's 50th anniversary show, further solidifying his place as a respected veteran in the wrestling world. In the 2000s, Tully briefly worked for WWE as a producer, contributing his knowledge behind the scenes. He also appeared in various nostalgic and celebratory events, such as Wrestle Reunion in 2005 and the NWA Legends Fan Fest in 2007. Tully's connection to the Four Horsemen remained strong, and he appeared in the 2007 DVD documentary Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen. In 2012, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame alongside his Horsemen teammates. By the late 2010s, Tully's career took yet another surprising turn. In 2019, he joined All Elite Wrestling, AEW, as the exclusive advisor to Shawn Spears. It was clear that Tully still had the fire to be part of the wrestling business, and his presence added a lot to AEW's storylines. He later aligned with FTR, managing the duo as they captured the AEW World Tag Team Championship. In 2021, Tully even stepped back into the ring, teaming with FTR to defeat Jurassic Express in a memorable match. Tully's time with FTR ended in 2022 after a storyline disagreement, but he wasn't out of the picture for long. He transitioned to AEW's sister promotion, Ring of Honor, where he managed a group called Tully Blanchard Enterprises. This faction included the Gates of Agony and Brian Cage. However, by mid-2022, the group was sold in a storyline to Prince Nana, becoming part of the Embassy. Shortly after, Tully quietly departed AEW and ROH. Tully Blanchard's career is a testament to resilience and adaptability. From his iconic days as a member of the Four Horsemen to his managerial roles in modern wrestling, Tully has done it all. He's faced ups and downs, but his passion for wrestling never wavered. Today, Tully's influence can still be seen in the business. He's part of a wrestling legacy that spans generations, and his daughter, Tessa Blanchard, is proof that the Blanchard name continues to shine in the wrestling world. Tully Blanchard's story isn't just about championships and rivalries. It's about a lifelong love for professional wrestling. Whether he was stealing the show in the ring, mentoring talent, or captivating fans as a manager, Tully's dedication to the sport remains undeniable. And that's the incredible story of Tully Blanchard, a true legend in the world of professional wrestling. From his early days working under his father's promotion to becoming one of the most feared members of the Four Horsemen, Tully has left an unforgettable mark on the sport. His career wasn't just about championships and rivalries. It was about passion, resilience, and an unmatched ability to entertain fans around the world. If you enjoyed learning about Tully's journey, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the careers of wrestling's greatest icons. We'd love to hear your thoughts too. What's your favorite Tully Blanchard moment? Is it his brutal I Quit match with Magnum TA, his days with the Four Horsemen, or maybe his unexpected return to AEW? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more stories about the legends, the rivalries, and the moments that made professional wrestling what it is today. Until next time, take care and keep loving wrestling. Classy Freddie Blassie. He was the ultimate bad guy, the maker of villains everyone loved to hate. He knew how to get under your skin, make you boo and hiss, and keep you glued to the TV. But Freddie was more than just a loudmouth with a mean streak. He was a legend with a lot of controversies, and today we'll explore all that. Born Frederick Blassie in 1918 in Oakville, Missouri, young Freddie grew up in a tough neighborhood, learning to fight early on. His passion for fighting made him join the Navy, where he improved his skills and developed a tough, no-nonsense attitude. After the Navy, Freddie found his calling in the world of professional wrestling. He loved the excitement, the characters, and the drama. He started wrestling as a tough sailor, and he quickly became known for his rough style. He wasn't afraid to bend the rules or make the crowd angry, but it was when he started managing other wrestlers that things really got interesting. His controversies will make you hate him even more, and I'm sure you'll love it. Starting with his hardcore violence, he was famous for being super violent. He actually filed his teeth to be sharp and pointy, and he would bite his opponents. Ouch! But that wasn't all he did. He used chairs and other things as weapons, and he loved to fight outside the ring. Basically, he wanted to hurt his opponents really badly. One time he had a match with a really popular wrestler in Japan named Rikidozan. Their matches were crazy violent. Blassie even bit Rikidozan's ear really hard, and the fans were shocked. People in Japan were so upset by how violent these matches were. Some people even said that fans were so scared they had heart attacks while watching. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but it shows just how wild things got. Blassie became a supervillain in Japan because of it, but everyone wanted to see their matches. Next up we have insults that crossed the line. If there was one thing Blassie was as good at as wrestling, it was trash talk. His signature insult, pencil neck geek, became a catchphrase that fans and opponents couldn't forget. But Blassie's sharp tongue often went beyond lighthearted banter. He targeted his opponents with insults about their heritage or race, especially in matches against stars like Bruno Sammartino, who was Italian, or Wahoo McDaniel, who was Native American. He was one hell of a racist man, and you'd know more about his racism once we start talking about how he exploited wrestlers as a manager. Coming back to his trash talking, at the time wrestling was filled with these kinds of comments. Villains like Blassie used them to rile up the crowd and get fans firmly on the side of the heroes. But looking back, it's clear how harmful these insults were. They reinforced stereotypes and added to the prejudice already present in society. So did Blassie believe what he said, or was it all part of the act? It's hard to say. Some wrestlers from that era insist it was all just a character he played, while others say there might have been some truth behind his words. Regardless, the impact of those comments is undeniable. As a manager later in his career, Blassie stepped into a role that wasn't just about guiding wrestlers. It was about controlling them. Wrestling was a brutal business in his era, and managers often held the keys to success or failure for the talent they represented. But here's the question. Did Fred Blassie, the Hollywood fashion plate, use that power fairly? Or did he exploit the very wrestlers he managed? In Blassie's time, managers were gatekeepers. They were the ones who booked matches, negotiated pay, and made travel arrangements for their wrestlers. In exchange, they took a cut of the wrestlers' earnings. This was standard practice, but let's not sugarcoat it. This gave managers an incredible amount of control over their talent's livelihood. Young wrestlers, desperate for opportunities, often had no choice but to accept whatever deal was offered. They trusted their managers to have their best interests at heart, but in many cases, that trust was misplaced. Some managers skimmed money, took bigger cuts than agreed upon, or prioritized their own profits over their wrestlers' well-being. Blassie was known for being smart with money, both his own and the wrestlers he managed. Some say he was a shrewd businessman who ensured his wrestlers got paid fairly, but others question just how much of their earnings he pocketed for himself. Did he help wrestlers thrive, or did he keep them under his thumb, using his reputation to exert control? While there's no concrete evidence that Blassie was outright exploitative, the lack of transparency in wrestling at the time leaves room for doubt. Plus, he would make all his heels extremely racist. He cared about the money and clearly didn't give a damn about ethics. The exploitation also leaves us with a question: how much money did wrestlers lose because they didn't fully understand the deals they signed? And how many of them felt pressured to accept unfair terms because saying no would mean losing bookings and income? The truth is, whether Blassie himself was fair or not, the system he operated within was deeply flawed. Wrestlers had little to no protections. There were no contracts guaranteeing pay or fair treatment, and there certainly weren't unions advocating for their rights. Wrestlers were disposable. If they got injured or fell out of favor, they were replaced without a second thought. Managers like Blassie thrived in this environment. They held all the power, and the wrestlers depended on them to survive in the business. Even if Blassie wasn't as ruthless as some other managers of his time, the power dynamic alone made exploitation almost inevitable. Anyway, what happened to Blassie? Even the king of men couldn't escape Father Time. In his later years, classy Freddie Blassie faced a number of health challenges. He battled heart problems and underwent a triple bypass surgery in 1994. This forced him to step back from his active role as a manager in the wrestling world. But Blassie was a fighter, both in and out of the ring. He continued to make appearances and remained a beloved figure in the wrestling community. Sadly, his health continued to decline. On June 7, 2003, Freddie Blassie passed away at the age of 85 due to multiple organ failure. Though his boisterous voice was silenced, his legacy lived on. He left behind a lasting impact on the wrestling industry. Remembered for his outrageous personality, his masterful managing skills, and his undeniable contribution to sports entertainment. Even today, fans remember his iconic phrases like "pencil neck geek" and his unforgettable interviews. Freddie Blassie, the Hollywood fashion plate, may be gone, but he'll forever be a legend in the world of professional wrestling. If you are a true fan, here are a few highlights of his career. I'm sure you'll love this segment. Fred was born on February 8, 1918 in St. Louis, Missouri. He grew up in a working-class family, loved wrestling, and had a knack for getting under people's skin even as a kid. After serving in World War II, he decided to chase his dream of becoming a professional wrestler. At first, he wrestled in smaller promotions in the Midwest. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him a chance to learn the ropes and develop his persona. Even early on, Fred was different. He realized being the bad guy, taunting the crowd, bending the rules, got him noticed. And once he leaned into that, his career really started to take off. Fred hit the big leagues in the 1960s when he moved to California and wrestled for the World Wrestling Association. With his bleach blonde hair, flashy suits, and loudmouth personality, he wasn't just wrestling, he was performing. Fans couldn't stand him, but that's exactly what made him a star. One of his most famous rivalries was in Japan, where he wrestled a legendary star named Rikidozan. Fred became infamous for his vampire act, pretending to bite his opponents until they bled. It sounds wild, but people ate it up. His matches drew massive TV audiences, making him a huge name internationally. In the US, his feud with John Tolos was another major highlight. Their match at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum in 1971 was one of the biggest events of its time, with over 25,000 fans packing the stadium to see Fred get his comeuppance. By the late 1970s, Fred's days in the ring were winding down. Wrestling had taken a toll on his body, and he couldn't perform like he used to. But that didn't mean he was done. Fred transitioned into managing wrestlers in the World Wrestling Federation. As a manager, Fred was as entertaining as ever. He worked with some of wrestling's biggest names like Hulk Hogan and the Iron Sheik, helping them rise to superstardom. Even though he wasn't wrestling anymore, Fred's sharp tongue and over-the-top antics kept him in the spotlight. In the end, Fred Blassie wasn't just a wrestler, he was an entertainer, a trailblazer, and a master of getting a reaction. Whether fans booed him out of the building or hung on his every word, he always left an impression. His larger-than-life persona, with his sharp suits, bleach blonde hair, and biting insults, set the standard for what it meant to be a wrestling villain. Blassie's impact wasn't limited to the ring. He had a massive cultural influence, especially in Japan, where his infamous matches with Rikidozan drew millions of viewers and helped wrestling grow into a global phenomenon. Back in the US, his feuds, like the one with John Tolos, packed arenas and raised the bar for storytelling in the sport. As a manager, Blassie passed his wisdom to a new generation of stars, including Hulk Hogan and the Iron Sheik. His quick wit and ability to rile up a crowd prove that charisma never fades, even after stepping out of the ring. In 1994, Fred was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, cementing his place among wrestling's legends. His autobiography, Listen You Pencil Neck Geeks, captures the humor and passion that defined his life. Even after his passing in 2003, Fred Blassie remains an iconic figure. His catchphrases, style, and approach to wrestling continue to inspire performers today, proving that his legacy is timeless. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed learning about the legendary Fred Blassie, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it with other wrestling fans. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss more stories about wrestling's greatest icons. Drop a comment below. What's your favorite Fred Blassie moment? Let's talk about it. See you in the next video. DDP was a wrestling innovator, but his obsession with planning every match move got him into trouble. Stay focused because we're talking about the fight that shocked the wrestling world and revealed a side of DDP you never knew existed. DDP is a legend, plain and simple. He rose to fame in WCW with his diamond cutter finisher and that infectious bang catchphrase. He was a three-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion, proving that you don't have to be a young buck to make it in the wrestling world. But even legends have skeletons in their closet, and DDP, despite his positive attitude and inspiring journey, has had his fair share of controversial moments. One of the most disturbing was his feud with The Undertaker in WWE. Now, this wasn't your typical wrestling rivalry with back-and-forth brawls and trash talk. WWE decided to take a dark turn and go with a stalker angle, and let me tell you, it got really uncomfortable, really fast. DDP was portraying this obsessed, deranged fan who was stalking The Undertaker's wife, Sarah. We're talking full-on creep mode here. He was taking pictures of her, invading their home, leaving cryptic messages, and even had a life-size mannequin of Sarah that he wheeled around. It was like something straight out of a horror movie. Now, I understand that wrestling thrives on drama and pushing boundaries, but this storyline crossed the line. It was incredibly disturbing, especially considering that Sarah was pregnant in real life at the time. Fans were deeply unsettled, critics were outraged, and it left a sour taste in everyone's mouth. This angle ultimately did more harm than good, severely damaging DDP's character and hindering his momentum in WWE. Another controversy that followed DDP involved a real-life backstage brawl with Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. Now, Steiner was notorious for his unpredictable behavior and his infamous shoot promos, where he'd blur the lines between his character and reality, often insulting other wrestlers with real-life jabs. Things reached a boiling point when Steiner, during one of his unhinged rants, reportedly made derogatory remarks about DDP's wife, Kimberly Page. Well, DDP, being the protective husband he is, didn't take kindly to that. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and the situation escalated into a full-blown fistfight backstage. This wasn't some choreographed wrestling match. This was a real, raw, and intense physical altercation. Now, this next controversy might surprise you. DDP was known for his meticulous approach to wrestling, particularly when it came to planning his matches. He was a firm believer in scripting out every move, every sequence, every detail. He believed this ensured a smoother performance, minimized the risk of injuries, and delivered a more polished product for the fans. But this approach wasn't always liked. Some wrestlers, like The Undertaker, liked to be more spontaneous in the ring. They felt like DDP's way was too stiff and didn't let them be creative. It caused some tension backstage, and it might be one reason why DDP didn't quite click with the WWE fans the way he did in WCW. So there you have it, some of the controversies that surrounded DDP throughout his career. It's important to remember that everyone makes mistakes, and these things don't take away from all the amazing things he's done for wrestling and for people in general. DDP is a true legend who overcame a lot to achieve his dreams. He's an inspiration to us all, showing us that it's never too late to chase your goals and make a difference in the world. If you are a real fan of DDP here, we have a quick rundown of his epic career for you. I'm sure you love it. Dallas Page was born on April 5, 1956 in Point Pleasant, New Jersey. Growing up wasn't the easiest for him. His parents split when he was little, so he spent the first few years with his dad. But when he was 8, he went to live with his grandmother, who raised him after that. Dallas also had a brother and a sister, but they grew up separately, so it was just him and his grandma. School wasn't exactly his thing either. He had dyslexia, which made reading and learning super tough. But one thing Dallas was great at? Sports. He loved basketball and worked hard to make his high school team. By the time he was a sophomore, he was already playing varsity basketball. Pretty impressive, right? After high school, Dallas went to college for a little bit but left pretty quickly. He wanted to start working and eventually became a nightclub manager. This guy was always full of energy and knew how to work a crowd, so managing clubs was a perfect fit for him at the time. But even then, something about wrestling caught his eye. In 1979, Dallas decided to try wrestling for the first time. He got in the ring for 3 matches, but a knee injury made him step away. Most people would have just moved on, but not Dallas. He always had this drive to push forward, and even though wrestling wasn't in the cards just yet, he wasn't done with it forever. By the late 80s, he was back in the wrestling world, but this time as a manager, he worked in the American Wrestling Association, AWA, managing a team called Bad Company and showing off his big personality. He also had these female valets called the Diamond Dolls, who added some extra flash to his act. Dallas wasn't wrestling yet, but you could already see the charisma that would later make him a star. In 1991, Dallas got his big break when he signed with WCW. At first, he stuck to managing, working with teams like the Fabulous Freebirds, and even managing a young Scott Hall, who was called the Diamond Stud back then. But here's where things get crazy. At 35 years old, Dallas decided he wanted to be a wrestler. 35. Most wrestlers start when they're teenagers or in their early 20s, but Dallas didn't care. He wanted to go for it. He started training at WCW's power plant, learning from legends like Dusty Rhodes. It wasn't easy, but Dallas was one of the hardest workers out there. He trained constantly, even on days when he didn't have matches. He wasn't the most natural wrestler at first, but his determination made up for it, and it paid off. Over the next decade, Dallas became one of WCW's biggest stars. He was known for his signature move, the Diamond Cutter. If you've ever seen it, you know how awesome it is. It's quick, it's powerful, and it can come out of nowhere. The fans absolutely loved it. Dallas racked up a ton of championships in WCW. He became a 3-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion, won the U.S. Championship twice, and held the tag team titles 4 times. He even became the 4th ever WCW Triple Crown Champion, which means he won all 3 major titles in the company. And in 1998, he made history by being the only U.S. champion to defend the title in a pay-per-view main event against Bret Hart. Not bad for a guy who started wrestling at 35, right? In April 1999, DDP had his big moment. He became the WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the first time at Spring Stampede. It was a huge match. He had to beat Sting, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair. And to make things crazier, Macho Man Randy Savage was the referee. DDP won the match by hitting Ric Flair with his Diamond Cutter. It was a massive achievement for him, but things got complicated pretty fast. Around this time, some fans started booing him. WCW decided to roll with it and made him a bad guy, or heel as it's called in wrestling. They didn't rush it, they slowly changed his character. Then came the match where everything shifted. On April 19th, DDP defended his title against Goldberg. He used brass knuckles to knock Goldberg out, smashed his leg with a chair, and taunted the fans by yelling, "Boo me now!" It was official. DDP was now the villain. Just a week later, things got crazy again. On Nitro, Sting challenged DDP for the championship and beat him, ending DDP's title reign after just 15 days. But DDP didn't stay down for long. Later that same night, there was another match. A 4-way battle with Sting, Goldberg, Kevin Nash, and DDP. This time, DDP won his title back by pulling off some sneaky moves. It was one of those wild nights where anything could happen. Kevin Nash wasn't happy about this and challenged DDP at Slamboree. After a chaotic match that even involved Randy Savage interfering, Nash eventually pinned DDP to win the championship. After that, DDP switched gears and formed a group called the Jersey Triad with Bam Bam Bigelow and Chris Kanyon. These guys were loud, tough, and ready to take over the tag team division. They even used a rule that let any 2 members defend their titles. They had a lot of fun matches, but like most wrestling teams, the group eventually broke up. In 2000, DDP was back in the spotlight. This time, he was feuding with Jeff Jarrett for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Things got personal when DDP's wife, Kimberly, betrayed him and helped Jarrett win. DDP bounced back by beating Jarrett in a steel cage match to win the title again. But then, something super weird happened. Actor David Arquette ended up winning the championship in a bizarre storyline. Yep, you heard that right. David Arquette. DDP tried to win it back in a triple cage match, but Arquette turned on him. It was a mess, even by wrestling standards. In 2001, Vince McMahon's WWF bought WCW, and DDP joined the company. He made a big splash by revealing himself as the stalker of The Undertaker's wife, Sarah. Yeah, it was a weird storyline, but it got people talking. DDP explained that he didn't care about Sarah, he just wanted to make an impact. This led to a feud with The Undertaker. At SummerSlam 2001, DDP and his partner, Chris Kanyon, lost to The Undertaker and Kane in a steel cage match. After taking some time off due to injuries, DDP returned with a new gimmick. He became a motivational speaker, always smiling and saying, "That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing." Fans liked this new version of him, and he even won the WWF European Championship. He defended it at WrestleMania X8, beating Christian. But not long after, he hurt his neck during a match with Hardcore Holly and decided to retire in 2002. Even though he retired, DDP couldn't stay away from wrestling. In 2004, he made a brief comeback, wrestling for smaller promotions and later joining TNA, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. He had some great matches and rivalries, but after a while, he decided it was time to move on. What makes DDP stand out isn't just the titles he won or the rivalries he had, it's the way he connected with fans. Whether you were cheering for him as the underdog or booing him when he turned heel, you couldn't help but respect his passion for the business. He wasn't a second-generation wrestler or someone with a fancy athletic background. He was just a guy who loved wrestling and worked his butt off to make it to the top. That's the kind of story people love to root for. Even after he hung up his boots, DDP kept making an impact. His DDP yoga program is a perfect example of how he turned his personal struggles into something positive for others. He created the program not just to stay in shape, but to help people take control of their health and lives. It's helped countless fans and wrestlers alike, including big names like Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall. These guys credit DDP for helping them turn their lives around, and that's a legacy even bigger than wrestling. Beyond the ring and the yoga mat, DDP has always been about positivity and motivation. His never-give-up attitude has inspired so many people to believe in themselves, no matter what challenges they're facing. Whether you're a wrestling fan or not, his story is one that reminds us all to keep pushing, even when the odds are stacked against us. In 2017, DDP was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, cementing his legacy as one of the greats. Watching him stand on that stage and share his journey with the world was a moment of pure joy for his fans. It was the perfect way to honor everything he's done for the wrestling business and beyond. So what can we take away from DDP's incredible career? It's simple. Never stop believing in yourself. Whether you're trying to win a championship, build a business, or just get through a tough time, DDP's story shows us that with hard work and a positive attitude, anything is possible. Thanks so much for sticking around and listening to the amazing story of Diamond Dallas Page. His journey is a true inspiration, and whether you're a wrestling fan or just someone looking for motivation, there's so much to learn from his life. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you more awesome content like this. Also, let us know in the comments, what's your favorite DDP moment? Is it one of his epic matches, his wild storylines, or maybe the way he's helped people with DDP yoga? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for watching. Remember, no matter what challenges you're facing, as DDP would say, that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. See you next time. Hulk Hogan, the Hulkster, the man who defined professional wrestling for a generation. But behind the iconic red and yellow, the 24-inch pythons, and the "what you gonna do" catchphrase, there's a whole lot of controversy. So much so that we have to ask, is Hulk Hogan actually the biggest clown in wrestling history? Let's rewind for a second. Back in the 80s, Hulk Hogan was the guy. He was the face of the WWF, selling out arenas and inspiring millions of Hulkamaniacs around the world. He told us to train, say our prayers, and eat our vitamins. He was the ultimate American hero, battling villains like Andre the Giant and the Iron Sheik. But here's the thing. Hogan wasn't exactly practicing what he preached. Behind the scenes, he was juicing, big time. He admitted to years of steroid use, even testifying in court about it. So much for that all-natural physique, huh? It's pretty clownish to preach about clean living while secretly relying on performance-enhancing drugs. And it wasn't just the steroids. Hogan was also known for being a master manipulator behind the scenes. He used his power and influence to control storylines and make sure he always came out on top. He was accused of burying other wrestlers, sabotaging their careers to keep himself in the spotlight. That's not exactly heroic, is it? It's more like something a self-centered clown would do. But the real kicker came with the Gawker sex tape scandal. A tape of Hogan with his friend's wife was leaked, and Hogan sued Gawker Media for invasion of privacy. He ended up winning a huge settlement, but the trial revealed some ugly truths about the Hulkster. During the trial, transcripts were released that showed Hogan using racist language, including the N-word. This was a huge blow to his image, and it led to WWE firing him and removing him from their Hall of Fame. Hogan did apologize, but many people felt it wasn't sincere. He tried to excuse his language by saying it was common where he grew up, which didn't exactly help his case. It seemed like he was more concerned with saving face than truly owning up to his mistakes. And let's not forget the time Hogan appeared in blackface on Saturday Night Live back in the 80s. It's an old incident, but it adds to the pattern of insensitivity and questionable behavior. So, what do we make of Hulk Hogan now? It's a tough one. He's a wrestling legend. No doubt about it, he entertained millions, inspired people, and helped make wrestling what it is today. But he's also made some serious mistakes, said some hurtful things, and been involved in some messy situations. Some people have forgiven him. They believe he's learned from his errors and that the good he's done outweighs the bad. Others can't look past his controversies. They feel like he betrayed their trust and that his actions can't be excused. Ultimately, it's up to each person to decide how they feel about Hulk Hogan. Is he a clown or not? Let us know in the comments below. But for his real fans, don't click away just yet, because if you love Hulk Hogan, here we have an epic rundown of his dynamic career. I'm sure you'll love it. You know the name Hulk Hogan, the blonde hair, the mustache, the bandana, and of course, the signature leg drop that electrified wrestling fans for decades. But before he became a wrestling legend, he was just Terry Bollea, a kid from Augusta, Georgia, with big dreams and even bigger muscles. Let's go back to where it all started. Terry was born on August 11, 1953 in Augusta. His dad, Peter, worked hard as a construction foreman, while his mom, Ruth, balanced being a homemaker and a dance teacher. He had an older brother named Alan, though sadly, Alan passed away at a young age. When Terry was just a toddler, the family packed up and moved to Port Tampa, Florida. This is where he grew up and began shaping the person he'd eventually become. Like a lot of kids, Terry loved sports. He played baseball and was pretty good, even pitching for his Little League team. But as he got older, something else caught his eye: professional wrestling. At 16, he discovered wrestling and instantly became hooked. Dusty Rhodes was one of his favorites, but it was superstar Billy Graham who truly inspired him. Graham's incredible physique and larger-than-life presence made a huge impression on young Terry. That's when he thought, I want to be like that someday. But wrestling wasn't his first career. Terry also loved music. He was a talented bass guitarist and even played in local rock bands. By the mid-70s, he was part of a band called Ruckus, which became pretty popular in the Tampa Bay area. People loved their performances, and it looked like music might be his future. But there was another side to Terry. While his bandmates were jamming, he was hitting the gym, building the kind of physique that would eventually turn heads. One night, while playing at a bar, Terry caught the attention of two wrestlers, Jack and Gerald Briscoe. The brothers were well known in Florida's wrestling scene, and they couldn't help but notice Terry's size. At 6'7" and nearly 300 pounds, he was hard to miss. They saw potential and suggested he try wrestling. At first, Terry wasn't sure. It was a big shift from playing music. But after some encouragement, he decided to give it a shot. That's when he met Hiro Matsuda, a legendary trainer known for being as tough as they come. Matsuda didn't go easy on him. During their first training session, Matsuda broke Terry's leg. Yes, you heard that right. He broke his leg, supposedly to test how serious Terry was about wrestling. Most people would have walked away after something like that, but not Terry. After 10 weeks of recovery, he came back, ready to prove he had what it took. Matsuda was impressed, and the training continued. Terry made his wrestling debut in 1977 under the Championship Wrestling from Florida promotion. His first match was against Brian Blair. At the time, he wrestled under a mask as the Super Destroyer. But Terry knew he was capable of more and started looking for opportunities beyond Florida. In the late 70s, he wrestled in Alabama alongside his friend Ed Leslie, who would later become known as Brutus Beefcake. The two wrestled as a tag team called the Boulder Brothers. Their chemistry in the ring got people talking, and fans began to notice Terry's raw talent. Around this time, he started experimenting with other names, eventually landing on Terry the Hulk Boulder after a chance encounter on a local talk show. Here's what happened. Terry appeared on the show alongside Lou Ferrigno, the actor famous for playing the Incredible Hulk. The host made a comment about how Terry, with his towering height and massive biceps, was actually bigger than Ferrigno. That moment gave birth to the name we all know today, Hulk Hogan. By the end of the 70s, Hulk Hogan was becoming a name to remember. He joined the World Wrestling Federation, WWF, in 1979 and immediately stood out. With his blonde hair, his charisma, and his impressive size, he had the perfect look for professional wrestling. He started to build a following and had memorable matches with legends like Andre the Giant and Bob Backlund. But Hogan wasn't just making waves in the US. He also wrestled in Japan, where fans nicknamed him Ichiban, which means number one. Wrestling in Japan gave him a chance to showcase a different side of his skills. Instead of relying on brute strength, Hogan used more technical moves, which earned him respect from fans and wrestlers alike. When Hulk Hogan returned to the WWF in 1983, wrestling would never be the same. His charisma, larger-than-life personality, and connection with fans were exactly what Vince McMahon needed to take the company and the sport of professional wrestling to a whole new level. It all started on December 27, 1983. Hogan made his official return during a television taping in St. Louis, Missouri, defeating Bill Dixon in a match that marked the beginning of a new era. Just a few weeks later, Hogan firmly established himself as a fan favorite by saving Bob Backlund from an attack by the Wild Samoans. Fans who remembered his earlier heel persona were now fully behind him. The story was simple. Hogan had turned over a new leaf, and Backlund vouched for him, declaring he's changed his ways. He's a great man. Then came January 23, 1984, a date that would go down in wrestling history. In front of a sold-out crowd at Madison Square Garden, Hogan faced the Iron Sheik for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. The Iron Sheik, managed by the cunning Freddie Blassie, was dominating the match. He locked Hogan in his dreaded camel clutch, a submission hold no one had escaped before. But Hogan powered out, fed off the roaring crowd, and delivered his signature leg drop to pin the Sheik. Just like that, Hulk Hogan became the WWF champion. After the match, commentator Gorilla Monsoon proclaimed, "Hulkamania is here." And he wasn't wrong. That night, Hulkamania was born, and wrestling would never be the same again. Hulkamania wasn't just a wrestling phenomenon. It was a movement. Hogan introduced his fans, who he called Hulkamaniacs, to his now famous 3 demandments: training, saying your prayers, and eating your vitamins. Later, during his feud with Earthquake in 1990, he added a 4th demandment: believing in yourself. With his vibrant yellow and red ring gear, larger-than-life entrances, and signature moveset, Hogan became the ultimate wrestling hero. His matches followed a thrilling pattern that fans couldn't get enough of. He'd start strong, dominating his opponents, only to face a setback that made victory seem impossible. Then he'd hulk up, summoning a surge of energy from the crowd's cheers, becoming impervious to his opponent's attacks. A big boot, a leg drop, and a 3 count later, Hogan was standing tall with his arm raised. By 1984, Hulkamania was in full swing. But it wasn't just the fans who noticed Hogan's star power. Marvel Comics did too. The Incredible Hulk was one of their most popular characters, and they struck a deal with the WWF to allow Hogan to keep his Hulk moniker, while Marvel retained trademarks on certain elements of his branding. This partnership was an early sign of just how big Hogan and professional wrestling was becoming. Hogan's career reached a whole new level in 1985 when Vince McMahon launched WrestleMania, the WWF's first major pay-per-view event. Hogan was front and center, teaming up with actor and TV star Mr. T to face Rowdy Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. The match wasn't just a wrestling bout, it was a spectacle, blending Hollywood and professional wrestling like never before. The match itself was full of drama and excitement. With Cowboy Bob Orton in Piper's corner, Hogan and Mr. T faced an uphill battle. But in the end, Orton accidentally hit Orndorff with his cast, allowing Hogan and Mr. T to secure the victory. WrestleMania was a massive success, solidifying Hogan as the face of the WWF and catapulting the company into mainstream pop culture. Hogan became a household name. He appeared on the covers of major magazines like Sports Illustrated, People, and TV Guide. He co-hosted Saturday Night Live and starred in his own Saturday morning cartoon, Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. Everywhere you turned, it seemed like Hogan was there, flexing his 24-inch pythons and promoting the power of Hulkamania. While Hogan was busy becoming a pop culture icon, he was also defending his WWF championship against a long list of challengers. In 1986, he took on King Kong Bundy in a brutal steel cage match at WrestleMania 2. Hogan's victory solidified his reputation as a hero who could take on any challenge. But perhaps Hogan's most famous rivalry was with Andre the Giant. The storyline leading up to their match at WrestleMania 3 was simple yet compelling. Andre, once Hogan's ally, turned against him and challenged him for the WWF Championship. The match took place in front of a record-breaking crowd of over 93,000 fans. Hogan and Andre's clash was unforgettable. The moment Hogan body slammed the 520-pound Andre was dubbed the Body Slam heard around the world. It was a defining moment in wrestling history, and Hogan's victory that night cemented his legacy as one of the greatest performers of all time. In the late 1980s, Hogan teamed up with Macho Man Randy Savage to form one of the most iconic duos in wrestling history, the Mega Powers. With Savage's wife, Miss Elizabeth, acting as their manager, the pair seemed unstoppable. But behind the scenes, tension was brewing. Savage became increasingly jealous of Hogan, suspecting that he and Miss Elizabeth were more than just friends. The drama came to a head in 1989 when Savage attacked Hogan during a match, officially ending their partnership. The feud culminated at WrestleMania 4, where Hogan defeated Savage to reclaim the WWF Championship. By the early 90s, Hogan was more than just a wrestler. He was a global phenomenon. He won 2 Royal Rumble matches in a row and added a 3rd WWF Championship reign to his resume by defeating Sergeant Slaughter at WrestleMania 7. But as the years went on, Hogan's career began to take a different turn. In 1993, after a brief return to the WWF, Hogan decided to step away from the company. His final appearance came at WrestleMania 9, where he won the WWF Championship in an impromptu match against Yokozuna. Shortly after, Hogan left the WWF to pursue other opportunities, including a return to New Japan Pro Wrestling and eventually joining WCW. Hulk Hogan's return to the WWF in 1983 marked the beginning of an era of larger-than-life heroes, unforgettable rivalries, and moments that defined professional wrestling. Hulkamania wasn't just a slogan, it was a way of life for millions of fans around the world. From his championship victories to his Hollywood appearances, Hogan's impact on wrestling and pop culture is undeniable. While his time in the WWF came to an end in 1993, his legacy as one of the greatest icons in sports entertainment lives on. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more legendary wrestling stories. This guy was a walking controversy. Broke Bruno Sammartino's neck, stole a championship belt, and practically started a war with his brutal style. Get ready for the insane story of Stan Hansen. Born in Texas, Hansen brought classic toughness from his rodeo background. He wasn't just playing a character, he was a force of nature. With his signature cowboy hat, leather vest, and tobacco chew, he looked like he walked straight out of a Western, and he fought like it too. The best part is that Hansen's career spanned decades and continents. He conquered territories across America, becoming a mainstay in the AWA and even challenging for the WWF Championship. But it was in Japan where he truly made his legacy. Hansen was a larger-than-life figure for sure. But with that raw power came a career filled with drama, debates, and a lot of what-ifs. Let's talk about what's probably the most infamous moment in Hansen's career. The time he broke Bruno Sammartino's neck. This happened back in 1976 during a WWF title match at Madison Square Garden. Hansen was still pretty new to the big stage at the time, but he was already making waves for his rough, no-nonsense style. In this match, though, things took a scary turn. Bruno ended up with a broken neck, and the wrestling world couldn't stop talking about it. Now here's where the story gets a little murky. Hansen and some promoters claim that his signature move, the lariat, caused the injury. But most accounts, including Sammartino's own, point to a botched power slam as the real culprit. Regardless of what actually happened, this was a career-defining moment for both men. Bruno was sidelined for months, and while he eventually came back, some believe this injury shortened his legendary career. For Hansen, it cemented his reputation as someone who wasn't afraid to push the limits, whether intentionally or not. Then there's the time Hansen had a match with Vader in Japan in 1990. If you've ever heard the phrase, "wrestling isn't fake, it's choreographed," this match is Exhibit A for how real things can get. During the match, Hansen accidentally poked Vader in the eye. No big deal, right? Well, it was a huge deal because the poke was so hard that Vader's eyeball actually popped out of its socket. Yes, you heard that correctly. His eyeball came out. And because Vader was as tough as they come, he just popped it back in and finished the match. This match became legendary, not just for the sheer toughness on display, but also because it brought attention to Japan's strong style of wrestling. Strong style is all about making everything look, and sometimes feel, real, with hard hits and intense action. Fans loved it, but incidents like this made people question whether it was worth the risk. Was the pursuit of realism pushing wrestlers too far? And where do you draw the line between entertaining the crowd and protecting the wrestlers? Another big controversy in Hansen's career wasn't about a match or an injury, it was about a championship belt. In 1985, Hansen won the AWA World Heavyweight Championship by defeating Nick Bockwinkel. That sounds great, right? But here's where things get messy. Instead of sticking around the US to defend the title, Hansen prioritized his wrestling commitments in Japan. The AWA wasn't happy about this and decided to strip him of the championship. Now, most wrestlers in that situation would probably hand the belt back, but Hansen wasn't most wrestlers. He kept the physical championship belt and continued to defend it in Japan, claiming he was still the rightful champion. This created a ton of confusion for fans. Who was the real champion? It was a mess, and the AWA took a hit to its credibility. Some people even argue that this whole situation played a part in the eventual decline of the promotion. From Hansen's perspective, he was probably just doing what was best for his career. But to the AWA and its fans, it looked like he was disrespecting the company and the traditions of the championship. It's another example of how Hansen's career was always walking that fine line between being a rebel and being a professional. Of course, we can't talk about Stan Hansen without mentioning his wrestling style. If there's one thing Hansen was known for, it was his stiffness. In wrestling terms, being stiff means you hit harder than most. And Hansen hit hard. His lariats, punches, and kicks didn't just look devastating, they often were devastating. This added to his reputation as one of the toughest guys in the business, but it also came with its share of problems. Some wrestlers respected his intensity and were willing to take the punishment because it made the matches feel more real. But others weren't so thrilled. There were plenty of stories about wrestlers who felt Hansen went too far, and even a few backstage confrontations over his stiff style. Injuries happened, and not everyone thought it was worth it. This debate, working stiff versus working safe, has been around for as long as wrestling itself. Hansen's career is a perfect example of why it's such a hot topic. On one hand, his style helped make him a legend. Fans loved the realism, and his matches were unforgettable because they felt like actual fights. On the other hand, there's a fine line between making things look real and putting people in danger, and Hansen crossed that line more than once. Despite all the controversies, though, there's no denying Stan Hansen's impact on wrestling. He was a trailblazer, especially in Japan, where he became a huge star. His charisma, intensity, and larger-than-life personality made him unforgettable. And while his career was filled with moments that sparked debates and raised eyebrows, those same moments are why we're still talking about him today. So, what's the legacy of Stan Hansen? He's a reminder of how wrestling isn't just black and white. It's a world where performance and reality blur together, sometimes in ways that are thrilling, and other times in ways that are dangerous. Hansen lived in that gray area, and whether you see him as a hero, a villain, or something in between, you can't deny the mark he left on the sport. Now let us take a moment to appreciate his dynamic career. With that being said, here's a quick rundown of his epic career. Stan Hansen was born on August 29, 1949, and grew up in Texas. You can probably guess how he got that cowboy image, right? Before wrestling, though, Stan was a football player. He played for the West Texas State Buffaloes, a college football team famous for producing other wrestling stars like Bruiser Brody, Dusty Rhodes, and Terry Funk. But Hansen's dreams of a football career didn't pan out. He tried out for the Detroit Wheels, a team in the short-lived World Football League, but didn't make the cut. Lucky for us, this setback pushed him toward wrestling, where he started his career in 1973. At first, he wrestled part-time while still pursuing football, but by 1974, wrestling became his main focus. Early on, he teamed up with a wrestler named Frank Goodish, who later became known as Bruiser Brody. These two were a force to be reckoned with, and their paths would cross again and again throughout their careers. Stan Hansen's big break came in 1976 when he joined the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, or WWWF, which we now know as WWE. Just 2 months into his time there, he started a feud with one of the biggest stars in wrestling history, Bruno Sammartino. Now here's where things get wild. During a match with Bruno, Hansen accidentally broke his neck. Wrestling promoters, being the storytellers they are, turned this real-life accident into part of Hansen's character. They claim that Bruno's injury was caused by Stan's lariat, a clothesline move so powerful it could take anyone down. In reality, it was a botched power slam that caused the injury, but the myth of Hansen's devastating lariat was born. The incident made Hansen a feared name in wrestling, and he continued to face big names like Pedro Morales, Andre the Giant, and Bob Backlund during his time with the WWF. But while Hansen had success in the US, it was in Japan where he truly became a legend. Hansen first wrestled in Japan in 1977 for New Japan Pro Wrestling. He had already built a reputation as the guy who broke Bruno Sammartino's neck, which made him an instant villain. Japanese fans loved to hate him, and he leaned into that role, facing off against top stars like Antonio Inoki and Tatsumi Fujinami. One of his biggest moments came in 1980 when he defeated Inoki for the NWF World title. At the time, Inoki was practically unbeatable, so this victory made Hansen a massive star in Japan. In 1981, Hansen made a shocking move. He left New Japan Pro Wrestling and joined their rival promotion, All Japan Pro Wrestling. This was a big deal. Wrestling promotions in Japan were fiercely competitive, and Hansen jumping ship was like adding fuel to the fire. In All Japan, Hansen's career reached new heights. He became the only wrestler to pin both Antonio Inoki and Giant Baba, two of the biggest names in Japanese wrestling. During championship matches, he won title after title, including the prestigious Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship multiple times. Over the years, Hansen built a reputation as one of the most dominant foreign wrestlers in Japan, earning respect from fans and peers alike. Back in the United States, Hansen had some wild moments too. In 1985, he joined the American Wrestling Association, AWA, and won their World Heavyweight Championship. But here's where things got messy. When Hansen was supposed to lose the title to another wrestler, Nick Bockwinkel, he refused. Instead, he took the championship belt with him to Japan and kept defending it there. The AWA was furious and threatened legal action, but Hansen didn't back down. In a final act of defiance, he ran over the championship belt with his truck and mailed it back to the AWA with tire tracks on it. Yep, that really happened. Hansen also had a brief run in World Championship Wrestling, WCW, in the early 1990s. He feuded with Lex Luger and even won the United States Heavyweight Championship from him. But his time in WCW ended after a disagreement over a storyline. The promotion wanted Hansen to be part of a comedic group called the Desperados, a trio of bumbling cowboys looking for Hansen. Hansen wasn't a fan of the idea, so he left WCW and went back to Japan, where he felt more at home. Of course, we can't talk about Stan Hansen without mentioning one of the most infamous moments of his career, his match against Big Van Vader in 1990. This match is the stuff of wrestling legend. During the entrances, Hansen accidentally hit Vader in the face with his bull rope, breaking Vader's nose. Things only got crazier from there. During the match, Hansen accidentally poked Vader in the eye so hard that Vader's eye popped out of its socket. And what did Vader do? He pushed his eye back in and kept wrestling. The match ended in a brutal draw, but it's still remembered as one of the wildest bouts in wrestling history. Outside of wrestling, Hansen had a few interesting ventures. He appeared in the 1989 movie No Holds Barred and later released an autobiography called The Last Outlaw in 2011. The book is full of stories from his wrestling career and gives fans a deeper look into his life, both inside and outside the ring. Stan Hansen retired in 2001, leaving behind a legacy that few wrestlers could match. Over his career, he won 10 world championships and became a true icon, especially in Japan, where fans still hold him in high regard. His hard-hitting, no-nonsense style paved the way for wrestlers who wanted to bring more realism to their matches. And let's not forget that cowboy image, the hat, the vest, the bull rope. It's hard to think of Hansen without picturing him stomping to the ring, ready to fight anyone who crossed his path. Stan Hansen's legacy in professional wrestling is undeniable. He wasn't just another tough guy in the ring. He was a pioneer of a unique, hard-hitting style that inspired countless wrestlers after him. His lariat, which became one of the most feared moves in wrestling, is still used by many wrestlers today as a tribute to his impact. Hansen's intense style and larger-than-life personality set him apart from everyone else in his era, and fans loved him for it. In Japan, Hansen is remembered as one of the greatest gaijin wrestlers of all time. He broke down barriers for foreign wrestlers, showing that you didn't have to be from Japan to win over the fans there. The respect he earned in Japan wasn't just about the titles he won, but how he carried himself in the ring. He was tough, he was honest, and he always gave it his all, no matter who he was facing. That's why he's still revered there even decades after his retirement. Even outside the ring, Hansen's influence remains. Younger wrestlers often cite him as an inspiration, not just for his wrestling style, but for his work ethic and dedication to his craft. He showed that you didn't need fancy moves or flashy gimmicks to be great. All you needed was heart, intensity, and a strong connection with the audience. For fans, Stan Hansen will always be remembered as the cowboy who did things his way. Whether it was clobbering opponents with his bull rope, standing toe-to-toe with legends like Antonio Inoki and Big Van Vader, or breaking necks, literally and figuratively, Hansen left a mark on wrestling that will never fade. So that's the incredible story of Stan, the Lariat, Hansen. From a Texas football player to one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time, Hansen's journey is the definition of legendary. If you enjoyed learning about his career, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more stories about wrestling's biggest stars. Let us know in the comments who you'd like us to cover next. We love hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.